About 6 months ago, I was developing a utility AI to manage some really complex sets of NPCs and their social schedules. Using Unreal Engine's blueprint system, I finally started feeling like I needed more from it. It had been kind of serving me really well up until that point. As I got more and more frustrated with my limitations and having to kind of troubleshoot everything when I started doing things that became a little bit more problematic or experimental, I began realizing that I should probably just get better at C++. It's probably the best way for me to continue using my stream of conscience as inspiration and manage to actually create stuff rather than fighting with the systems around me. And that's really where the idea for Floppy Rights started germinating, was trying to turn a blank Visual Studio project into a text-based adventure. One of the staple features of a text-based dungeon is the dialogue system. It's really the entire mode of control for the player. In this practice project, I designed a system that allowed the player to type full sentences into their notebook to kind of respond to the world and all the NPCs they might encounter. There's a cryptographic algorithm used predominantly in search engines called the Levitian distance. It compares strings of characters from two different words and evaluates them based on how many changes would be required to make them the same word. I implemented this initially as an accessibility feature and a way to limit the already overwhelming amount of edge cases I would have to anticipate while I started writing the story. At least that is what it's set up to do. Quickly after developing this, I began to explore combinations of puzzle and narrative that I couldn't help wanting graphics and sophisticated UI and adaptive audio to fully realize. Initially interested in developing a rudimentary engine using SFML and C++, I quickly became overwhelmed and ran into a bunch of problems with user input and multi-threading that kind of forced me to either refactor my code with the little experience I have, or possibly pick the project up in an engine where the really base level stuff is already optimized for me. I started by drawing some sprites in GIMP, mostly so I could quickly see the more tangible elements of the world I wanted to create. Once I had a couple animated characters, I convinced myself to try Godot. I have had experience using Unity and Unreal, and felt it might be time to try the elusive open source underdog. The first game engine I ever used was Blender Game Engine back in 2014 or 15. Godot has kind of the same energy, and I liked that, but I immediately did not like that many of the things I tried to learn from GDscripting tutorials was out of date as of 4.0, and this keeps leading me to an absurd amount of confusion when trying to learn the language. After a couple weeks, I had a pretty rough-looking playable prototype up on itch to show to my friends and to help me commit to the scope of the project in a more public fashion. One moderately sized 2D map with 4 to 5 biomes and a simplified twin-stick RPG with responsive events triggered only by what you write in your notebook. You want to read the street sign? Write sign in your book. You want to read the headlines? Then write news in your book. You want to find out who Ria is talking about? Write mailbox or trailhead in your book. There's no inventory. There are no items, weapons, or special abilities, just walking, dashing, and a single charged shot as your weapon. And then finally the laptop, or also known as notebook, and I'll probably keep referring to it in both manners throughout this whole video, to use to explore the world. Those are your only tools in opening the world up. The world is set in a 90s phone booth freaking retro futuristic desert side city. With a strong conviction to keeping all the core principles of the game as they are, I began the rather daunting task of building a world through image and text that would be compelling enough to never get any of these dopamine-inducing upgrades or suffer through potentially tedious open-ended note-taking. This last part is particularly troublesome to me. I really feel like I need to make sure that any note the player might take will have some impact on the world. The impact doesn't have to be immediately evident or equal in force, I think on some level I should be trying to make ambiguity fun rather than trying to limit its existence. For me, the player needs to experience some type of progress every time they enter something in the laptop. Always moving laterally or forward, never still or stationary. To start writing the story, I remembered a few years ago I wrote the first 40 or so pages of a book using a program called Scrivener, which I found suited my non-linear workflow and kind of segmented component-based workflow really well. But Scrivener costs $60 after its free trial is over, and I'm currently operating with losses, so that wasn't really in the picture. I ended up finding this incredible piece of semi-ancient software called YWriter, or YWriter 7. It's a word processor designed to be organized like a coding IDE by a software developer turned science fiction author who wanted to write his stories in an object-oriented manner made up of chapters which hold scenes, which hold characters and goals and body copy, all to be stored in one XML formatted file. One file which I realized I could parse directly into Godot to utilize it for dialogue, narration, puzzles, and names. After manually rewriting all of the story beats I had so far into YWriter, I was perfectly set up to just write my story in YWriter and have minimal cleanup to do after my script automatically brings all the dialogue, narration, code words, and names into the game. This was an incredible breakthrough for me. I had never really made my own third-party integration. I have pretty much always used other people's tools, and it felt inaccessible to even try to problem-solve quality of life stuff by myself. After all this, I started getting really fed up with my quickly thrown together sprites and the kind of sloppy, unorganized tile sheets I created in GIMP. I felt the tools weren't great for precise, detailed pixel art either. They would often run into inconsistencies when trying to erase or draw one pixel at a time. Luckily, another program I had been wanting to play with was Aseprite. I just hadn't had a reason to do this, while most of my projects to this point have been 3D. Aseprite made animating and designing significantly faster. It actually led me to designing a 15,000 square pixel image that I would use for the map of the game, featuring every item, landmark, and location drawn out by hand for about a 48 by 48 pixel tile map. For a while, this was really great way to design the world, but soon I learned just how badly having a multi-layered 15,000 pixel image can affect performance in both Aseprite and Godot, even with 16 gigs of VRAM. So I spent the last week or so breaking this image into 36 2500 pixel squares. This has drastically improved performance across the board, and now I'm playing with lighting and y-axis sorting to try and see what the world actually feels like for the player, instead of it just being an Aseprite file. Right now, this world is populated by two types of NPCs, your neighbors and clients with randomly assigned appearances, social identities, and macro narratives. And then the other type is a class of NPC that I would say act more like obstacles and are the root of most friction the player will reliably experience. Surveillance drones, police, cars, wildlife, and then these things called Zen servers. Though all of these NPCs will react to the player in a variety of ways, they won't necessarily stick to their preordained roles. One neighbor NPC might see you with your weapon out or in conflict with another and decide you are a threat, which could lead them to join the combat, one way or the other, while someone else might ignore it entirely. When any NPC is spawned, it will have a significant portion of their personal data saved to a simulated blockchain server. Their name, their accolades, their demerits, their histories, and their psychologies will all be accessible to the player if the player can find out how to interact with the server rooms that are distributed across the map. Luckily, with all these systems in place and a lot of the groundwork done for the general gameplay, I can start to focus on all of the incredibly detailed world and asset creation required to make this simple note-taking mechanic accessible and fun. I'm looking into developing more complex UI, finding a variety of ways to allow the player to enter information, so it's not just an open-ended notepad. So if you're interested in supporting the development of Floppyrite directly, you can donate any amount or join my Ko-fi to receive breakdowns every month of more complex aspects of my code and game design. Finally, the best and the completely free things you can do to support Floppyrite is wishlist it on Steam and then subscribe here on YouTube for all the future devlogs. Thank you so much for watching.